First, Argentina's new government is set to reveal radical new economic measures on Tuesday. This as Javier Milei will be sworn in as president. He's inherited a crisis with inflation there nearing 150%. Milei vowed sweeping changes in his inaugural speech. Joel Richards has the highlights.
A new era begins for Argentina, with the libertarian Javier Milei sworn in as president on Sunday. The outsider promises a radical shift in this country. He said he will end decades of failure, but warned there will be drastic shock therapy for the economy in the coming months. Milei said there is no alternative available.
Si un país carece de reputación, como lamentablemente es el caso de Argentina,
if a country is lacking in reputation, as is unfortunately the case with Argentina, business will not invest until they see a fiscal readjustment, bringing it down. And no less important, for gradualism it is necessary that there is financing. And unfortunately, I have to tell you again that there is no money.
Y lamentablemente, tengo que decírselos de nuevo, no hay plata.
Milei transformed Argentina's political landscape and political agenda during the campaign. He was often seen wielding a chainsaw. But beyond the theatrics, he must now govern the country, which faces one of its worst crises in decades. Present at the ceremony on Sunday were Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky, but also members of the global far right, from former Brazil President Jair Bolsonaro to the Hungary Prime Minister Viktor Orban, all signalling a shift in Argentina's foreign policy. Milei won the presidency on the promise of change, and on day one in office, he has guaranteed unprecedented change for this country. Joel Richards for CGTN in Buenos Aires.
As you heard, Milei is promising economic shock treatment for Argentina. He's promising deep spending cuts to slash public debt and drive down inflation, which we said earlier is near 150%. Argentina owns the International Monetary Fund nearly $45 billion, and it needs to pay more than $10 billion of that to other multilateral and private creditors by next April. The trade deficit is at $43 billion, and its poverty rate has now inched up to nearly 40%. For more on these measures and if they will work, we're joined by Benjamin Norton. He's the founder and editor-in-chief of Geopolitical Economy Report. Good to see you. These, shock treatment, extreme measures, whatever adjective you want to use. Let's start with who is Javier Milei, because his personality by itself is controversial.
Absolutely. Javier Milei is a very eccentric personality. He's been compared to Donald Trump, but ideologically he's quite different from Trump. Trump was actually economically much more of a protectionist. Milei is a self-declared anarcho-capitalist, and he follows in the footsteps of this very fringe U.S. economist Murray Rothbard, who, for instance, proposed a free market of adoptions, making it legal to buy and sell children. And Milei has proposed this idea. He also has proposed the idea of making a free market of human organs. And as your reporter mentioned, during his campaign, he was known for bringing to rallies chainsaws. He is also known affectionately, not as an insult, affectionately by his supporters as El Loco, the madman. And he's known for being eccentric in other ways. For instance, he has 5 dogs, and those dogs are clones. They're all clones, identical clones of his previous dog who died. And he claimed that his dead dog spoke to him from the afterlife and told him that he should run for president. So this is a very eccentric man. But in terms of his economic policies, he claimed that basically the silver bullet that's going to solve all of Argentina's economic problems is dollarization. Now, this is not new in Argentina. Argentina has defaulted on its sovereign debt several times, and it has a history going back 100 years of being trapped in unpayable debt, defaulting on that debt, facing severe devaluation of the currency, economic crisis. It's a cycle we've seen it go through again and again and again. And this is actually probably the 3rd time, depending on how you define it, that a government has tried to dollarize. And in each case, it temporarily works, and then it explodes when they run out of dollars.
What does that mean, dollarize? If the goal is to cut down on debt or public debt and bring inflation down, because It's hard for us, and I'm sure you feel the same way, is I don't understand 150%. It's just a really, really terrible number, right? I don't know how you could even manage week to week, let alone quarter by quarter. But how does dollarization, how is that technically going to help fix those two problems?
Well, we should keep in mind that it's not necessarily the amount of debt, it's what that debt is denominated in. So as an example, Japan has more than 200% of GDP of debt, but that debt is denominated in yen. In the case of the United States, it's 100% of GDP, but that's denominated in dollars, which the United States can print. The difference is in Argentina. Argentina has massive amounts of debt, not only owed to its multilateral debt owed to the International Monetary Fund, but also debt owed to bondholders that was sold in capital markets. And that debt is largely around 80% denominated in dollars. And of course, Argentina, unlike the US, can't print dollars. This is not its domestic currency. So in many cases throughout history, when countries are suffering from severe inflation, it's because their currency is not the currency that they borrowed in. And essentially what has happened is that Argentina has had to essentially print money to try to service that debt. And the Central Bank of Argentina has been buying huge amounts of bonds, and those bonds are denominated in dollars, and the central bank can't print dollars. So it's monetizing the debt, which is leading to this severe inflation. And so Milei's response is that we're going to dollarize. Now, it is true that that will probably temporarily bring down inflation and bring some kind of stability. But the problem is, this has happened multiple times. And in each case, when the country runs out of dollars, the system explodes. Because essentially, by adopting the dollar, this is the most extreme form of a currency peg. And multiple occasions in Argentina, past presidents like Carlos Menem, they also pegged the currency to the dollar, which does maintain stability. But in order to maintain that peg, you have to have dollars in your foreign exchange reserves.
You have to have the dollars to continue that stability. I think I'm understanding what you're saying. The playbook for a lot of other countries that have been through these sort of economic crises is essentially to work with their creditors to restructure a plan, to say, I'm going to cut spending on X, I'm going to raise revenue on Y, and we're going to get this going. And sometimes the creditors would take a haircut. Would you say the country is as close to a default as there could be on a technical side? Because if you dollarize it, these creditors, that's fine, you can dollarize it, they're going to want their money back. And in some way, shape, or form, you still have to make those payments. And like you said, maybe you pay it for a month or two, but eventually you do run out of dollars, and someone's got to buy in on this plan. What are the creditors saying?
That's absolutely right. In fact, the outgoing government that just left, they had negotiated a deal with the International Monetary Fund and some foreign creditors. And essentially for the entire tenure of the administration of President Alberto Fernandez, his government was negotiating with the IMF. Now, the IMF doesn't forgive debt, but they were having many negotiations going on years now. And like I said, this is not new for Argentina. It's kind of the joke around the world of Argentina, is that it's always trapped in these cycles of debt. I think it's also important to understand the macroeconomic situation in Argentina. Like many countries in Latin America, Argentina is a very export-oriented economy, and it goes along with the commodity supercycle. So Argentina's top exports are largely agricultural products, things like soy, wheat, corn, beef. And what that means is that when commodity prices are very high, Argentina tends to have some kind of economic boom. And then when commodity prices collapse, the economy collapses. It's gone through this bust and boom cycle for a long time. But it also means that it frequently has a trade deficit and a current account deficit. And Argentina imports a lot of oil and gas. It imports machine parts and capital goods. So this is the main reason why this country has been so chronically trapped in this cycle. And in order to buy, of course, oil, in order to import capital goods and machine parts, you have to have hard currency. You have to have dollars. But
Benjamin,
all of its dollars go to paying off its debt.
Benjamin, I got about 20 seconds left before I get in trouble here. Give me the odds. 50-50, this thing works out and turns out okay in 3 months, or are we facing a disaster again?
Well, it looks like it's going to be a disaster. And if you listen to the speech that Milei gave on Inauguration Day, he said clearly, he told his people, In the short term, things are going to be very difficult. He said unemployment is going to rise, poverty is going to rise, and there's going to be even more inflation, because what he's going to do is just completely devalue the currency like we've seen in the past.
Right.
And I think it's important to study Argentina's recent history, because this is not the first time it's been in this situation. And previous governments have responded with, austerity and shock therapy, and the results were not good.
It's going to be challenging. Benjamin, always appreciate your thoughts on it. Thank you.
My pleasure.